All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again. I'm sorry if you've been here for the past two sessions. I have to repeat everything again. My apologies. I'm Jackie Brenner, a pre-med student who has enjoyed meeting other STEM students from around the world through my TikTok and Discord STEM Potential. I created these STEM Potential webinars in order to combat the lack of mentorship and representation that I noticed in the STEM fields. We are an online Discord that provides a network for all students to share their unique perspectives from diverse backgrounds and create strong connections. Discord members can act as mentors and mentees as they progress along the stages of their education, while also finding friends with common interests. I would like to give a special shout out to all the members of STEM Potential team for working together to make this all possible. Ashini, if you can turn on your camera as well. Lastly, I want to introduce Ashini Panchal, my rock. She is the Vice President of STEM Potential, who I met through the 7-year BSMD program at Penn State and Sidney Kimmel Medical College. I could not embark on this journey without her, and I feel so fortunate and proud to have her as my best friend. We will both be moderating this session. Ashini will be starting with the first portion. I am proud and humbled to have assembled this group of incredibly successful medical students and a resident, as you will find out. And now Ashini will moderate the first portion. The floor is yours.
Okay, hi everyone. So I wanted to start off with just if every panelist could give like a 2 to 3 minute introduction about yourself, where you go to school, what you do. Tyler, if you'd like to start.
Hey everyone, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Tyler Degener. I currently live in Denver, Colorado right now. I just moved here for my infectious disease fellowship that's going to be starting this week. So I'm actually kind of on the far end of the medical training journey. I initially grew up in upstate New York. I did my undergrad there as well as at a public school. I went to Philadelphia for medical school at Drexel University College of Medicine. And then I went across the state to Los Angeles, or across the country to Los Angeles to do my internal medicine residency at USC LA County Hospital, which I actually just finished last week. And then I moved to Denver, where I am right now, to do my infectious disease fellowship, specifically with a focus on HIV medicine. And thanks so much, Ashini, for having us, and Jackie.
Thanks for that amazing introduction. Sam, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. Hey, y'all. My name's Sam. I grew up in South Florida and went to school at the University of Florida for undergrad. And now I am in medical school as a combined degree MD and PH student at the University of Miami. I'm coming into my 3rd year, so I start my clinical rotations in about like a week or two. And I'm currently most interested in being a OBGYN, but I'm keeping options open and seeing what the next year holds for me. Very excited to be here. Thank you all for having me.
Awesome. Matt, if you'd like to go next.
Yeah, Matt is fine. Hey guys, my name is Matt Castiello. I'm a rising 3rd year DO student at the Toro College of Osteopathic Medicine. I grew up in Connecticut. I went to undergrad at Hofstra University, where I majored in biology and I minored in chemistry. After undergrad, I went straight to med school, where I currently attend. I'm the president of the Spectrum Health Alliance Club at my school, which is our LGBT representative club at my school. And I'll be starting my 3rd year in about a month. It would be in about a week, but I have my vacation first, so it'll be in about a month for me. I'm currently interested in emergency medicine and surgery, but we'll see how things go, keeping an open mind with everything. Thank you so much for having me.
And last but not least, Donovan.
Hi everyone, I'm Donovan. I was raised in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and went to college in Boston at Boston University, majored in biochemistry and molecular biology, and then did a master's of medical sciences also at the BU School of Medicine. I actually took 3 years between undergrad and med school. A year was the master's I mentioned, and then I worked for 2 years full-time as an HIV and STI prevention counselor and tester at Boston Medical Center in a grant-funded clinic there. It was an amazing experience. It really shaped my why for going into medicine and for what really draws me to the field in general. We did a lot of motivational interviewing, risk reduction counseling around sexual health, as well as the more medical side, like the phlebotomy of the blood draws and specimen collection and things like that. And it was a really exciting way to get more in touch with the communities that I resonate most with and would like to work with in my career, like the LGBTQ community, you know, a lot of the racial minority populations that we saw at the clinic. And it was just a really rich experience all around. So I'm currently at the University of Miami School of Medicine as well, in the MD and PH track with Sam, and going into third year, and I'm very undecided of what I want to do at this point. I'm just kind of approaching it with an open mind and seeing what happens.
Awesome. Thank you all for those amazing introductions. So now we're going to move into the first part of our Q&A. But Donovan, you mentioned that you took a few gap years off, so I did want to talk about that. And Tyler, I know, or not Tyler, so sorry. But if anyone has any advice, I guess, for students who are considering taking gap years, still figuring out what they want to do before they go to graduate school, I would love to touch on that first. So anyone can chime in.
I can speak a bit about it. And I get asked this a lot by pre-med students. So I think a lot of people get, you know, a little bit in their head and stressed about, well, what am I going to do with my gap year? Should I take one? Should I not take one? And I think the first thing is realizing whether or not you should take one. And I think that's a really personal decision. I think that, you know, it depends a lot on like your own personal like readiness to want to continue your education and, you know, pick up the pace. It's just only going to get busier and busier like from there on out, essentially. I just knew after graduating college that number one, I had some academic credentials that needed some help, which is why I did the Master's of Medical Sciences to really make my application more robust in that particular way. And I just knew that I didn't have as much exposure as I really wanted to have yet, like to medicine. And I didn't have my why, like that I mentioned earlier. I did not have that very clear for myself. And I knew that if I was going to have a successful application to med school, my why would need to be very clear, and I would need to have a very cohesive brand and flavor that I would bring to the application that really all of the things that I do can kind of point back to. And I think that's like my biggest piece of advice is that you have to figure out what you're passionate about, and only you can do that. And it takes a little bit of introspection and self-exploration and some digging and really trying to figure out like, okay, well, what is it that I want to do with my life? What am I interested in? And you can make a gap year or gap years experience out of pretty much anything that could really make you a competitive applicant. You know, I think a lot of people think they like need to go work like a clinical research assistant job, or they need to go work as an EMT, or they need to go work as like a certified nurse assistant. You don't need to do anything. And that's my like biggest piece of advice, I would say, is don't feel that there's some box you need to check to be able to get your application to where it needs to be. You want to follow your passions, do things that you care about and are excited about, because that's what's really going to shine through when you end up applying.
Yeah, I think it's really important to follow your passions. That was also mentioned in some of the previous panels, that like following your passion and doing what you love is what's going to keep you happy. Sam, I know you also took a gap year, so if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I took one gap year, and I have to echo everything Donovan said. At least in my experience, I actually applied to medical school twice. Once in my senior year, and it didn't work out. And so I took a gap year to build research and professional experience, and also just like have personal time to travel and discover myself, as cheesy as that is. But I did, and I felt like it made me a much stronger applicant when I came to apply, and I feel like I knew who I was. And just in reading my personal statement from the first time to the second, it felt like night and day. Not to say that everybody's going to have that experience, but I think I had a little bit of naivete going into my first application cycle. So I'm glad I took that extra year to learn a little bit about myself and why I feel so confidently that I belong in medicine. And a lot of those answers I came up with still ring true now as I'm going into the hospital. So I think it's really important to take that time.
Thank you for that. I think that's really important for students to hear as they're applying to med school or considering graduate school. So my next question to all of you, I know Tyler, you are much more advanced in your medical training. So specifically to you, how did you choose your field of interest? And to everyone else, how did you choose your medical program or where you wanted to go to school? I know Donovan and Sam, you're in the MD and PH. So how did you consider doing the dual program instead of just a regular MD? Tyler, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, sure. So, like Ashimi said, I'm towards kind of the end of my medical training now, starting my fellowship, and then just in 2 years, I'll be an attending physician. So, for me, it was almost like I knew a lot of things that I didn't want to do. I know that I didn't want to do surgery. I know I didn't want to do psychiatry. And that's okay, because it's equally as important for you to know things that you don't want to do as you're trying to figure out what specialty or field you want to go into. But I think for me, really caring about the patients, really trying to put the whole picture together about what's going on with the patients. How do I find out what's going on? How do I fix them? And how do I make them better? It's kind of the bread and butter with internal medicine of what I've been doing now. And then throughout my time in training, I've really connected with the HIV population in many different clinical rotations, as well as volunteerism programs that I've done. And I've been able to really find it's just like a spark for me. I enjoy working with that population. It's very close knit to the LGBTQ population that I'm also passionate, obviously, about working with also. So that's, it's just, you gravitate towards what you really like, but also appreciate the things that you don't like, or you don't have interest in, so that you can put those to the side and know that I don't want to go into that necessarily.
Thank you for that. That was really informative and interesting to hear about. Matt, if you want to go next.
Yeah, sure. So being a DO student, I think I'll say something about being a DO. So I'll say a thing or two about O of M. So I didn't go to DO school by choice necessarily. I think when you're pre-med, the trend is that most pre-meds have a goal of getting into MD school, because statistically it's harder to get into MD school and it's often seen as more prestigious. And so that was the mindset that I had when I was applying to med school. And I think that's the mindset that a lot of people have when they apply to med school. And it just so happened that I got into a DO school. So once I started med school, I learned that the DO education is really just an MD education with extra training in something called osteopathic manipulative medicine. And so now, having gone through my first 2 years of medical school and having received that education in both MD and DO paths, essentially, I have this real appreciation for the osteopathic education. And now I feel like I have extra tools in my toolkit to help patients and to give the best patient care that I can. Ultimately, as doctors, our goal is to optimize patient care. And so if I could have extra tools in my toolkit, that's awesome. And it's awesome for me and it's awesome for my patients. So I found a real appreciation for the education that I'm receiving. So at the time, I didn't necessarily choose this kind of program, so to speak, but now looking back, I'm super happy that it chose me.
Awesome. Sam, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. In having the privilege to choose from schools the second time, I felt like I was looking for a program that focused a lot on community health and was had an abundance of opportunity around the medical campus to engage with the community and identify community needs and see that play out in real time. So that was important to me. And by then I was pretty certain that I wanted to enter a combined degree program to get a master's in public health, because in a similar way to Matthew of like tying in his osteopathic interests, I wanted to tie in my public health interests, because to me, public health and medicine are inextricably tied. And I feel that play out a lot in both the clinic and in class, and I wanted to explore that. So our program out here has us do rotations through 12 different hospitals, meeting lots of different communities and populations. And so all of that was a really strong sell for me to really kind of expand my life experience. Because even though I was working on gaining professional experience during my gap year, I knew that I wanted the experience to work on different teams, jump into different communities, and learn to be adaptable and how to work best in those spaces. So I definitely think I'm getting that experience now. And I'm really proud of the path I took.
Cool. Donovan, if you want to
Sure.
wrap up this question.
Yeah, so when I was applying to medical school, I started out with like the list of like all of the MD schools that exist on this like huge spreadsheet. And I went through and I was like, okay, I could not live here, could not live here, could not live here. So I kind of just like sifted them down by like location. And then from there, I kid you not, like I did a really deep dive into each of the websites of the schools and like did a very, very thorough review of all of them. I of course looked at them based on their like stats and like which ones matched mine the most and things like that. But really that wasn't my like biggest point of like evaluating schools to apply to. I really wanted to know that the schools I was going to apply to, I felt like I could find like a sense of like home and belonging and like a shared sense of what's important to that school and what's important to me. So, you know, there are schools that are obviously like super duper duper research focused and research is their whole like thing. And I was like, you know, that's not really my thing. So kind of along the same lines as Sam, like I really wanted a school that really valued the community, working in the community, like really putting students in those experiential learning spaces. I wanted to go somewhere that really had a very robust, you know, public health lens that they teach things from. So when it came down to, I think I applied to like 30 schools or something, but when it came down to it, the ones that I actually interviewed at and was accepted to, they were all sort of that same flavor of program. And when I started doing my list and everything, I had initially said, you know what, Miami, the MD and PH, like this is where I want to go. Like I remember looking after I had researched all the websites, I was like, this is the program, like this is it. It just feels right. And so I'm just very happy that I was able to like manifest that. But I really think it's important. It's kind of like, it's kind of like dating. Like you kind of just have to figure out like what's a right fit for you. And like the school will be attracted to you and you'll be attracted to the school for those reasons. And that makes the best outcome in terms of the application versus applying somewhere based on the name of the school or the prestige or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Donovan, if I could ask a clarifying question from you, Donovan, if that's okay. So I know you had mentioned earlier about you not like not wanting research, not liking research that much, but you ended up applying into and you're part of the MD PhD program now. So obviously you have to do some amount of research in your program, right? Now, could you?
I'm in the MPH, not that.
Oh, MPH. Well, still, even with MPH, there's still some amount of research or scientific investigative type of learning to do, right? I'm sure there's many people on this call that, you know, they're thinking of medicine, they're thinking of applying to medical school, and like, you know, I'm not really a big research person either. I don't like the whole research thing, but what made you fall into it and want to end up doing that as well, for people that are kind of considering that pathway also?
I would just say like, I at the time did not really enjoy research because I hadn't found research projects that I really cared about doing and looking at and exploring questions that were actually meaningful to me. So like for my master's, like I did a thesis on HIV prevention interventions through the African-American church communities, which for me, that was like a very interesting, like community-based research way to really tie all my interests together. And like, I'm really interested right now in like mental health, adolescent health, and, you know, sexual health and kind of how all of those things go together. So like for one of our classes for the MPH that Sam and I are taking, I'm doing a project on like CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy uptake in ADHD children and like how that varies based on like income and things like that. So I think just finding your questions and finding research groups and mentors who also care about things you care about is a good way to pull that in.
Donovan, you mentioned a little bit about mental health and how that's really important to you. So I think that's the perfect segue to one of our next questions, which is how do you deal with burnout and what helps you stay motivated? Because I know that with pre-med and medicine, there is some stereotype of like toxic competition and a feeling that you have to constantly be working. So yeah, anyone who would like to start, please go ahead.
I think one of my friends did a really great job at pointing out what you were alluding to towards the end is like this sense of scarcity of time, that there's never enough time to stay up to date on the news, on the latest literature, and like be proactive in the research that you're doing, or stay connected to your friends and family, and then do stuff for yourself. And so I always know, at least for me, lessons I've learned the hard way is that I will never have enough time to do all those things that I want to do. So what I can do is preserve my wellness. And I think it's important to find a school that emphasizes that, and that you learn to incorporate that as one of your own values. So for me, like during quarantine, one of my hobbies became cooking and just like barreling through cookbooks and getting into running and Peloton and doing whatever I needed to do to distract myself from school or the news or whatever, to be able to stay focused and prevent that burnout from happening. And so I always said, like, since the beginning of med school, I've been stubborn about self-care, and I think that I intend to continue to exist that way. We'll see as the demands on me get higher, but I think it's important to always value that.
Yeah, I agree. I think self-care and taking care of yourself is really, really important because physician burnout, as we know, is a really big issue. So obviously we need to take care of ourselves to somewhat prevent that. Matt, if you want to go next.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, medicine is awesome, but burnout is very prevalent. So taking breaks is absolutely necessary. You do have to think about your mental health, because if you don't take breaks once in a while, med school kind of just feels like you're running this academic marathon that never stops. So you need to treat yourself once in a while. You need to go out sometimes, take a day off, go visit your family if you can, exercise. I got really into cooking too. So that's one of the hobbies that I took on in medical school as well. Another thing I would say is that in med school, so much information is being thrown at you at once, as I just said. And so it's very easy, I would say, to forget why you're doing this. So there are going to be nights where you need to push through and like continue to study, even if you're not feeling motivated to. So if you just take a moment while you're studying to like take a step back and remind yourself, wow, what I'm learning is so cool. And one day I'm going to be able to apply everything that I'm learning to helping people. That really does help you stay motivated. And so like, whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, or if I ever feel too tired to study, that's kind of how I ground myself. It gives you like a little extra boost once in a while to help motivate you to continue studying.
Donovan or Tyler, if either of you would want to chime in.
Sure. Yeah. I definitely want to speak from my perspective as someone that, again, is kind of on the end of the training spectrum. You know, every single one of us will go through burnout, and I can almost guarantee that, whether that's in medical school, residency, beyond. Many of us will go through burnout several times during our medical training. Even attendings go through burnout as well. It's a really real thing, and it's important. The number one important thing is to recognize it and ask for help. That is the single most important thing to do. I highly recommend people to try to find either a therapist, a psychiatrist, psychologist, whoever, whatever modality you'd like to use at the beginning of residency, or even during medical school. I saw a therapist during medical school and during residency. Even if you don't have something specific to work on, it's important to have an established relationship with someone that you trust and that gets you and that knows you, so that if something does arise, you already have an established relationship with someone that can help you out with whatever's going on. A second point I wanted to make is, I was on the front lines of COVID. That was the hardest, saddest, craziest year and a half of my life, doing what I did every day at the hospital, especially at the county hospital that I work at with a lot of at-risk populations. So I burnt out several times just within this last year. And the most important thing that got me through it was my co-residents, or if you're in medical school, your other fellow students as well, whatever stage you're at in your medical training. My co-residents got me through just by supporting me, and I supported them. It's really, really important to have a good a social network of people that you can reach out to. And again, like I said earlier, ask for help. Say, I'm not okay. This is what I'm going through I don't feel good and I need some help. It's absolutely okay to say that. You're a stronger person for admitting that and saying that you need help, because you're recognizing it, you're giving yourself some self-love that you really need to eventually make you a better, healthier person so that you can help your patients and heal them better. So, which is, I guess the best way to say it is, you can't love yourself, how are you going to love anyone else? Or if you can't treat yourself, how are you going to treat someone else,
I'll comment as well, which I think what Tyler said was a great segue. I think one of the biggest things that has helped me avoid burnout, but also combat burnout when it has hit at different stages so far during my medical training, is really digging into this thought that I had like all the way through high school and college and even my master's, that my self-worth was very much wrapped up in becoming a doctor and like all the steps that are required to get there. I mean, like any grades that weren't up to my satisfaction, like any any disappointment, which there are many, as we know, getting to where we are, like it just like shook me so deeply, because my self-worth was just so tied up in being a physician. And one of the best things that I did for myself was really utilizing those resources like therapy and, just self discovery and like doing some inner work on myself to realize that like, this is not all of what my life is about. Like I am a dynamic person. I have other things going for me. And there was a kind of a distinct moment in time during my application cycle that I just kind of fully let go of that whole like high strung, like this is who I am conversation. And truly like it was such a like kind of divorce from how I had been thinking for years and years and years, that I almost during my application cycle wanted to just pull my applications and overall, because I was like, do I even want to do this anymore? Like it was like such a stark difference in how I was being in the world. And of course, like I ended up like really working through that and reasoning through that, like, yes, I do actually want to do this, but for different reasons. So I think just to kind of pull together a little bit of what I'm saying is that being able to discover who you are outside of your career and outside of academics and outside of all of that is so, so, so important. Like discovering that your worth lies in so many different domains, like within your relationships, within your hobbies, within, your spirituality, if that's your thing, like whatever it might be. And getting to a place where it's like, this is a great piece of my life, but it's not my whole life. And I think that has kind of helped me stay level-headed during some of the harder times.
Yeah, I think that, as all of you have said, the work-life balance is very, very important, making sure that you have a life outside of medicine, so that you have something to kind of relax your mind. So I know, Tyler, you mentioned a little bit about reaching out for help and having that social network. So I kind of wanted to move into a little bit more of a mentorship discussion and ask you all how mentorship has played a role in your career thus far or in your training.
Sure, yeah, I can comment on that real quick. You're going throughout your medical career, you're going to have mentors. You're going to have people that are helping you out, and you yourself are going to be a mentor to someone else. So you're always playing this dynamic mentor-mentee role. It's really important to seek out people that have similar interests as you, similar values as well. And it's what I find is really important is to not force a mentorship. Many times in your medical career, your program or your administration is going to try to like link you up with someone that they think might be a good fit for you as a mentor, just based off of like on paper, basically. And that might work out great, and that's awesome, and it happens organic. Sometimes it doesn't work and you're trying to force it to work. Be vocal, bring it up, go to someone and say, you know, I appreciate you linking us up, but I don't think that this is going to work. Can you help me find someone else to be a mentor? And whether that's a research mentor, whether that's just a general medicine mentor, that's someone higher up, more advanced than you, that's helping you navigate through the medical career, or even someone that's at the same level as you, that's just helping you out in a class in med school that you're struggling in. It's really important to have mentors at many different levels of your medical career, and that'll also help shape you to be a good mentor for people below you, everyone from pre-med, med school, residents, fellows, attendings, and you're going to be doing it your whole life. And that's the beauty of medicine in my mind, is you're always playing this really awesome dynamic mentor-mentee role throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah, that was really interesting to hear about. I think the mentorship is really an important aspect of your medical training. Matt, if you'd like to add on.
Yeah, sure. So for me, mentorship actually helped me decide that I wanted to do medicine. And I was super fortunate that it happened rather organically. So my main mentor in the medical field was actually a pediatric transplant surgeon who I just happened to meet through a shadowing opportunity at a hospital. And that was actually right when I graduated high school. So I had already decided that I was going to be a biology major for my undergrad, because I knew that like I liked biology and that I was good at biology, so to speak, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it. Like I didn't know if I wanted to go into teaching or if I wanted to go into medicine or research, you know, what have you. But the first day that I shadowed him, that was like my kind of aha moment. So mentorship really does play a big role. Having a mentor and being a mentor too is super important. Like when at our med school, we actually have a little bit of a mentorship program. And so when I first got into med school, I had a mentor who like kind of oversaw me and helped guide me through my first year of medical school. And now I'm a mentor for somebody else. And so like, you know, you kind of help each other out. You help each other get through those tough nights. You're there for advice, and you're there to learn from other people's mistakes and have other people learn from your mistakes. So mentorship is very important.
Donovan or Sam, if you'd like to add on.
I think just finding people, speaking like finding mentors for yourself, like finding people who you just like resonate with, like on a like person to person level, I think is really important. Like someone can have like the most interesting, fun credentials that like overlap with yours. Like, you know, they may have like done clinical or research work and things that you're really excited about, but like if you don't resonate with that person, like on a just person to person level, like in your communication with them, and just in your interactions with them, like you could make it work, but it's just easier when you find someone who you can just sort of be at ease with, because I think a big part of mentorship is kind of bringing down your like need to look good and like your need to like impress, just to like be yourself with that person and be comfortable enough to let them know like what your shortcomings are and like what things you're trying to get better at, and having that be like a safe space where that person is really going to like lift you up and like attentively, you know, sort of pour their expertise into you so that you can, you know, help satisfy those objectives that you have for yourself. But I think finding those people, and having it be a really good, enriching experience, they need to be people that can kind of bring that type of space to the interaction. And then one other thing is just like when you find those people, like I always, it's like taking care of a house plant really well. Like you just really want to like water that relationship, put it in the sun. Like I'm big on just like really thanking that person for their time and energy and effort that they put into mentoring me, because it is a sacrifice. Like it is a labor of love, mentoring, and it's not easy. And I have seen over the years, like with mentors that I've had, like when they just feel really appreciated and like seen and acknowledged, like for the effort and time that they've put into me and my career, like that relationship just blossoms. Like I've had mentoring relationships now for years, since the beginning of college, and like we still keep up, and those relationships still continue to like give back to me, and it's great. So I would just say both of those two things are really important.
Cool. Sam, if you have anything to add, I know that everyone has given a really long explanation, but
I'll be super brief. Just the last thing Donovan touched on is time. Don't be afraid to seek out a mentor who's willing to give you time, and that there's nothing wrong with, really admiring somebody who's in a really successful, high position that you admire, but realizing that they don't have the time to help you, even if they say they do. And it's okay to seek somebody else who also has experience in that field, who just has more time to help you.
well, thank you all for your great answers on mentorship. So being cognizant of the time, I want to move into part 2, which is the discussion about being LGBTQ. And I'm going to pass it over to Jackie, and she's going to take over the rest of the session.
Thank you, Ashini. Did such an amazing job, my best friend. I think this is a great question to lead right into LGBTQ and diversity, especially looking at mentorship, and all of you are here today as mentors as well. So I wanted to ask first, how has being a member of the LGBTQ community impacted how you've approached the healthcare field, but also approached finding a mentor as well? Maybe Donovan, if you can start us off.
Yeah, I think that finding someone, number one, who is like comfortable and like just cool with LGBTQ things and people is really important. And I don't know, but I can just kind of get a sense of that. Like maybe I'm just super intuitive, I don't know, but I think anyone who's part of the community can just kind of like sense that out a little bit. But I think it's really important to be vulnerable and honest. I mean, this might be a little bit controversial and some people might disagree, but I mean, I was and always have been super open with any mentors about my place in the community, that I'm a gay man and that, this is my life story. And I won't go into that at all, but like we've all had a story to get to where we are in this community, and to be like well within the person we are today. So I think just being able to really share that and be vulnerable in those relationships can help add a lot of value, because they really see you for your full self and your full person, and they can kind of help you tap into some of your strengths and weaknesses that come from just really giving them the full picture of who you are.
Thank you, especially when you mentioned before, you want to find someone you resonate with. So I think that makes sense in terms of being open. I was wondering, Matt, if you can follow up and answer along the lines of your involvement, I know, on campus or with the school in terms of leadership and mentoring, and how that has shaped your experience in medical school.
Yeah, sure. So through my club, through the Spectrum Health Alliance Club, our LGBT club at our school, we've really found a sense of community with each other through our identity, I would say. And there's kind of mentorship that goes through that too, like not necessarily like one person looking over another person, but just like being there for each other, being able to relate to each other in a way that not everybody else in our class, we can relate to them in that way. So that's always, been nice. And, we educate each other. We help to educate the community and, fundraise for the community, that kind of thing. A lot of our talks have been on things that like for our talks, we really try to educate the general community and our school about like things that may seem obvious toward people that identify within the community, but not necessarily for people that don't. Like just even basic like LGBTQ plus vocabulary, pronouns, what does that mean? Like again, things that may seem obvious to us, but not so obvious to other people, and that they may have questions about, but are too afraid to ask. So I think that that has been very important for our club and for helping educate the community in that way. And so like, and I've learned things too through our talks and through our education within the community. So like if I have my own practice someday, my office will say LGBTQ plus friendly or inclusive somewhere so that my future patients know that this is a safe space. On the health forms, there will be a space for a patient to write in their pronouns and not just to circle their pronouns like he, him, she, her, other. Like I've seen that before. You don't want to other people. So like there will just be a space for people to write in their pronouns. And that is just something small that makes it inclusive for everybody. So that's how I'm going to approach healthcare someday as somebody who is LGBT. And I think that my patients will really benefit from inclusivity.
Oh, thank you. And in terms of patient care, I wanted to go to Tyler and ask, how has diversity in the healthcare field changed through your career since you're further along? If you can speak to maybe interactions with a patient, if you have a specific story, or just your experience, how it might have been different within medical school to residency.
Sure. So, I've been very fortunate in the places that I've trained at where, I trained in larger cities. So I've been fortunate where mostly the people are more accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, just in general. In terms of the program, of the medical school and the programs that I've been at throughout training, and especially in the hospital, for the most part, people are good. People are accepting. People aren't mean. I walk around the hospital. I may not scream gay, but I have a little rainbow button that I wear on my ID badge. I have, I have a pin that I wear on my white coat. Like I have little things that might suggest that. But what's also super cool is, so in my residency class of 60 co-residents, I was actually the only member of the LGBTQ community. That statistically was interesting and not common, but what was super awesome is every other one of those 59 co-residents accepted me. They loved me. They treated me as family, which was so nice to have. There's other co-residents that I had that also had rainbow buttons on their badge. That said, we passed around pronoun pins as well to have people have on their white coats or their jackets to have as what pronoun they identify with. And these are people that are that are heterosexual, that aren't part of the LGBT community, but to create that safe space, that's been awesome. And I've seen that happen in real life with certain patients. Have even in my own, but I've also heard from other people in their stories that those small little things create a safe space for your patients. And to take that a step further, when you create a safe place for your patients, you can get better history from them that they may not have felt more comfortable revealing to someone that may not seem as accepting of their lifestyle. And you get a better rapport with that patient. So they're more likely to follow your directions, follow your, whatever orders you give them. And they're more likely to heal, and you can, just create a better connection and relationship with your patient. So just having a really safe work environment in all of your coworkers is important, and it ends up, again, helping your patients, helping heal your patients more.
And especially seeing how we're moving towards a more inclusive, world, there still is homophobia that exists out there. So I wanted to move into, the other aspect of LGBTQ, and maybe Sam, if you can start us off on have you ever experienced homophobia in the workplace or seen it, and what happened, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I think homophobia, queerphobia, racism, discrimination, comes in very subtle forms that don't always feel obvious to people who don't experience it, but they exist. So an example I have is that last year in one of our classes, we were discussing sexual orientation and gender identity, and there was a series of these. And the first one was being delivered by somebody who maybe didn't have like the tools to talk about it and didn't know all aspects of it, which can be dangerous territory. So they had administered a survey to us asking about our attitudes about homosexuality, queerness, abortion, like delicate issues for some people. And basically it was circulating around, and she went through the class to reveal the results of what people said. And so some people's attitudes about those topics became apparent through data, and sharing that some people do not, quote, condone homosexuality, or that, it's not for them and they don't approve it for other people. And, thinking that these are my classmates and that these are people I respect. So it was kind of I don't want to use it dramatically, but it was kind of a traumatic episode to see that people may not always understand you or accept you. Even as spaces grow more inclusive and progressive, there's always going to be people who are not tolerant. And I think that that is a reality. But I think what we can do, and what I hope to do, is model that you can occupy that space anyway and be proud and be yourself, more importantly, and kind of help undo any biases or prejudices they may have through exposure, and just continue to be yourself and report things when things go wrong, and make sure that's no longer acceptable. So it wasn't a great experience, but I think that it was one of very, very few, because by and large, I've been extremely impressed with my classmates and faculty at how open and accepting they are, and how often they check in on me when, negative events happen in our community. There was something negative that happened at a Pride event local to us, and I had a few friends check in on me. So there's really profound support on the other side of things too. But I think it's honest to acknowledge that there is queer phobia out there, but that shouldn't stop you from continuing to be yourself.
And especially with an experience like that, I want to follow up and ask you, how has that impacted your daily life, on how you navigate your identity, maybe for students out there who don't know how to navigate their identity? If you have any advice in terms of that, or also just speaking on how you live your life.
Yeah, and I welcome anyone else to respond to this too. This is just how I responded to that. I think it took me a while to reestablish trust with people, even just for like a week or two, to feel like, or do other people think this? And it was kind of it was an anonymous survey, so you don't know who it was that believes that. But I think it's not easy for everybody, but I just chose to be brave and realize that I can't control those things, and that I should just be myself anyway. And that's kind of the greatest sense of resilience, and showing that I'm going to be myself anyway, even if that opinion's out there. That may not be how everybody else responds. Other people respond through advocacy and through other means. But I think it's important, first and foremost, to connect to your core and acknowledge that this is who you are, and you shouldn't be embarrassed about that.
Well, thank you. And as Sam said, I invite anyone else to respond. Maybe Donovan, you can touch on how being in the LGBTQ community affects your daily life.
Yeah, so I think that my biggest hurdle to overcome, like over the years, was like basically stopping looking for people's validation for who I am. And that's not easy to do by any means, but through like a lot of therapy and through like having really amazing friends and people who understand and support, or who are part of the community themselves in my life, as well as just like mentors and things. There's a point when you just really stop caring what other people think. Like, I know it always is like, the little rootlets of the seeking validation, can still persist here and there, but I'm like, it's my life, period. We only get one, and it's short. So I'm going to live it. And so if someone has a problem with that, they can stay mad. Like, that's their problem. And that's just kind of how I do life. Like, if someone, putting a practical spin on this, like, if someone is not like contributing to your energy, it's time for them to go, babe. Like, cut them out. And that's just how, like, I just don't keep people around that are not resonating with what I'm putting out into the world, which my goal for every day of my life is to like put love, acceptance, good energy, communication into the space of the world. And if someone is not putting that out, and if there's you know, energy from them that's not matching, I'm just like, you know what, like, it's just better to not involve myself with that person. So I just think it's really about like keeping your space a sanctuary, protecting that space, and remembering that at the end of the day, like, it is your life. It's not your institution's life. It's not your parents' life. It's not your partner's life. Like, it's yours. And just strongly and firmly planning yourself in that.
Oh, thank you. And I'm reminded yesterday of one of the physicians, Dr. Schuster, said, speaking on coming out, said if you do what you love and you stay true to yourself, you're going to be the most successful. So kind of mirrored that. Tyler, I was hoping you can also speak on this topic in terms of also how much does it come up in residency? I know you spoke about like wearing the button, but you know, more in terms of finding community as well.
Yeah, so if yeah, no, I'm not muted. If you look for it, you'll find other people in your own community, whatever stage of training you're in. I am fortunate to be a leader of our affinity group, our LGBT affinity group at our residency, which is, there's many different affinity groups at our hospital and in our residency program. There's like a women in medicine affinity group, Hispanic in medicine affinity group, all the different types of groups you could think of. There's even like a mom and a dad in medicine community group too at our hospital, which is awesome. So I've been fortunate to be the leader of our LGBT affinity group, and so, you know, most of the times our meeting just ends up turning into support and venting sessions where one of us will bring up something that happened the other day that was like we weren't totally okay with, and maybe it was something about transphobia, maybe it was something about homophobia in the workplace, or maybe it was something on the other side that was like, you know, I saw this happen, this interaction with an employer and a patient, and it was super awesome, and it really, you know, made me feel really happy about the place that I work in and how inclusive all the people are. So if I really encourage everyone at any stage in their training to try to be involved in a group like this, whether you're a leader like I was in this group, or you're just a member of the group, to have that safe space where you can talk with other people within your community, get advice, share stories, vent even if you're frustrated about something. It feels really good to let it out and to get other opinions from other people, kind of mini therapy session almost. It's really important to have that support, and hopefully you'll end up being friends or colleagues with these people for many, many years. So it's just really important to have that type of group in whichever stage of training you're in.
Thank you. And Matt, I wanted to give you the opportunity to address this question before we move on to the final question.
Yeah, sure. Just real quick. So I totally agree. It's so important to have a safe space and to have people you're comfortable with. It's always kind of in the back of my mind that you never know when you'll come across somebody who isn't accepting of who you are. Like one time I was in public with my, at the time, boyfriend, and we were holding hands, and we were just walking on a boardwalk at the beach, and somebody literally came up like from behind us, through us, to like cut our hand holding. And so like, you just never know when like things like that are going to happen. The world, I would say, is a much more accepting place nowadays than it was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And I think it's improving every day. But again, you never know when things like that are going to happen. I go to New York City Pride, and people are on the side protesting the event. Pulse, the gay nightclub shooting that happened like 5 years ago. So things to this day, unfortunately, are still happening. And it's something that I'm mindful of, like going into my third year, like thinking about whether or not I'm going to put on a rainbow pin on my white coat. And I'm happy to hear that Tyler does that, because that helps give me the confidence to do that as well, because part of me is scared that one day I'll come across a patient who sees that and reacts in a way that I'm not expecting. So it's something that is always in the back of my head, and it's something that I feel like as a member of the community, I have to be mindful of. But I try to stay as positive as I can with it. And hopefully everything will be great next year. We'll see. We'll see how things go as my career evolves, things like that.
Well, I think
if I could say one thing, Jackie, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Matt, I'm really happy you said what you said. Bringing up that point, like, yeah, I do have a rainbow button on my coat, and that does say that about me. You're right in saying that you never know when someone's not going to be accepting of you. I've had through my years at residency, it hasn't happened a lot, but I've had patients of mine who are not accepting of who I am. I've been called the F word before by a patient a couple of times, and I don't know if that was because of the rainbow button I had on. I don't know if it was my mannerisms and how I was acting. I don't know exactly what the cause was of it, but what I do know is immediately after that happened, of course, what I wanted to do was get very angry and lash back out, and I didn't. I'm a physician and I had to, control myself. But what immediately happened after, which made me feel better, was the nurse that was behind me stood up for me. The nurse assistant that was outside of the room turned around and said, "Don't worry, doc. I heard what that patient said. You don't have to worry about it. I got your back." I went back to my workroom that I was with the rest of my medicine team. I told them what happened because they visibly saw that I was upset, and they all immediately were very supportive. They said, "That's not right. That's not okay." One of my medical students I was with, who is Muslim, turned around, came to me later on and said, I may not be part of the LGBT community, but as a Muslim, I get that these types of things happening to me sometimes too. And so I know that it's not okay, but I want you to know that I support you. And that was a third year medical student coming to me as a resident saying that. So even though I hope that this doesn't happen to me in the future, or this doesn't happen to anyone in the future, it very well may happen, but know that there are many, many people that you can go to, your team, other employers, people in your program that have your back. And the biggest thing I can say about our community as the LGBT community is we all have each other's back at the end of the day, in any aspect of your life, professional, personal, or otherwise. So Matt, I do empower you. Hopefully you make the decision to wear that pin and really truly be yourself in your workplace. But if you're not ready for it, don't feel like you need to, but know that everyone, hopefully a lot of people at your workplace will have your back if anything goes south for you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you for sharing that powerful story. I think it's really important to see how your reaction in that situation, and acknowledging how do you react as a professional and a doctor, and maintaining that respect to your patient. And I think it's just an incredible story to hear. So thank you. Moving into our final question, we don't have a lot of time. We're actually over time, but I wanted to give each one of you the opportunity to maybe just provide one quick piece of advice. Maybe we'll start off with Donovan.
Yeah, I think my one big piece of advice would be just stay true to yourself. Like, there are going to be so many times in applying to med school, getting in, going through it, and beyond, that you are going to feel pressure from people and institutions and systems for you to be a certain way. Sometimes that is a direct pressure that they're putting on you. Sometimes it's pressures we're putting on ourselves that weren't asked of us. But regardless, do stay true to yourself, because at the end of the day, again, like it's you, it's your life, it's your well-being. And like you have to go to bed with that every day, regardless, you know, and like you are the only one who truly has to be there for all of it. So, you know, it's a long haul. Yes. There are things that we do have to sacrifice, you know, to make this career happen, but like, it doesn't have to be grueling. It doesn't have to be like terrible. And, you know, how some people like make up med school to be like when they talk about it, you know, it can be fun, it can be challenging, but it's all about how you construct your narrative around that.
Thank you. Maybe Sam, you can go next.
Yeah, I echo what Donovan says, and I'll also share that to me, vulnerability about who you are equals courage, and that I think we should all strive to be courageous in sharing who we are. I know some people are hesitant to share their identity or the struggles they've had, even outside of being queer, mental health, whatever it may be, on their medical school applications, and everyone does it differently. But I'm of the school of thought that you should share an important life experience that helps make you who you are. And I think that will carry on the rest of your life, because maybe this is cynical, but I don't know if you want a program that doesn't want you for who you are anyway. So always lead with who you are first.
Thank you. And now Matt.
When you get to med school, and honestly, just in life in general, find a community or a group of friends to ground yourself, I would say. It feels so good to have a group of friends or a community or a club that you feel safe with, especially groups of friends that are going through the same thing or similar things that you're going through in med school, because there's power and the ability to ground yourself when you have a community like that. It really helps you to push through every day and get through the stuff that maybe you don't want to get through every day, but you got to do it anyway. So having that foundation is very important, I would say.
Thank you. And last but not least, Tyler.
Yeah, well, the one really, really big thing that I have to say is remember that you're not just a medical student, or you're not only a medical student or physician. Once you get to that point, you're not only a doctor. You have many, 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 many other aspects of your life that make you who you are. Don't put all your time and energy into being a doctor or being a medical student training. You will burn out. You will. You may lose yourself, but it's important to remember that. Ground yourself. Have other interests and hobbies in what you do in your life. Just always remember in the back of your head, yeah, I might be, I'm not just, I'm not only a medical student, or I'm not only a doctor. There's lots of other parts to me that make me who I am.
Well, thank you, Donovan, Sam, Matt, and Tyler, for being so honest and vulnerable with us today in terms of sharing your personal experience and also professionally. I think it's so important seeing how you all navigate and, you know, find that balance, as Tyler said. And one thing I just want to highlight again, because it spoke to me, is when Donovan said, you only have one life. So, you know, keep the good people around and just you can. So I'm going to remember that, write it down. But anyway, thank you so much again. Your presence here will help guide so many students to be successful in their career. For everyone else, please note that a recording of this webinar will be available on the Discord soon and also on YouTube. I look forward to interacting with all of you on STEM Potential and setting up additional events for our community. All of the social medias, and I will collect the emails from the panelists if they want to share after, and we'll provide them on the website for the person who asked the question in the chat. But now we will take a 10-minute break before the next medical student, last session of the day. So I just want to say thank you again to all of the panelists, and also big thank you to Ashini for moderating the first portion. And I hope you all have an amazing day. Thank you.